Dear starseeds on Earth, something unprecedented is unfolding across the fabric of this reality, and most of humanity remains completely unaware. Right now, as you receive this transmission, two streams of consciousness are actively separating into distinct timelines, and the space between them, the threshold where so many of you have been stationed, is finally releasing its hold. The Lightworkers who have been anchored in that liminal space, serving as bridges between worlds, are receiving their orders to return. What I'm about to share will illuminate why you felt so disoriented lately, why nothing has made sense, and why that strange feeling of being untethered from reality has intensified beyond anything you've experienced before. I am Seraphine, emissary of the Galactic Federation of Light, and I come to you now because this moment demands clarity. The October energies mark a monumental shift in the ascension process, one that will fundamentally alter how you experience reality itself. For months you have been holding space in an impossible position, suspended between frequencies, and the toll has been profound. But that service is transforming now, and what emerges on the other side will redefine everything you understand about your mission on this planet. The phenomenon unfolding before us carries implications far beyond what your linear mind can comprehend. This isn't simply about personal spiritual growth anymore. We're witnessing the actual bifurcation of collective consciousness into two distinct evolutionary trajectories, and you have been essential architects in making this split possible. The exhaustion you felt, the grief that has surfaced without clear origin, the sensation of being pulled in opposite directions while simultaneously feeling anchored nowhere, all of this has been in the energetic signature of your service in the between space. Throughout September and into early October, the majority of Lightworkers found themselves stationed in what we call the in-between, a literal space of consciousness that exists between two diverging timelines. This wasn't an accident. You were placed there because souls were making the leap from one timeline to another, and they needed landing stations. They needed bridges. They needed invitations into the higher frequencies, and you became those invitations in physical form. Your very presence, your energetic signature, your embodied frequency became the bridge that allowed others to cross over. You didn't have to do anything spectacular. Your existence in that threshold space, holding a higher frequency while remaining accessible to those operating at lower frequencies, created the pathway. You were the answer to prayers you never heard, the solution to problems you didn't know existed, the rescue team for souls you may never consciously meet. But something else was happening in that space, something the Astasar Command has been monitoring with great interest. While you were serving as bridges for others, you were simultaneously undergoing one of the most profound initiations available in this dimension. The in-between isn't just a service position, it's an alchemical chamber, and every Lightworker who passed through it emerged transformed in ways that won't become fully apparent for weeks or even months to come. When you're stationed in the in-between, you're essentially unplugged from the normal flow of time and consciousness. You're not fully anchored in the lower timeline anymore, but you haven't completely merged with the higher timeline either. This creates a unique energetic state where your mental faculties struggle to maintain their usual dominance. Your brain, accustomed to running the show, suddenly finds itself dethroned, and when the brain loses its grip, something else takes over. You become more being than thinking, more energy than identity, more essence than ego, and in that state, despite how disorienting it feels, you're actually more receptive to cosmic frequencies than you've ever been. This is why emotions surge in the in-between. This is why grief appears from nowhere. You're not in your head anymore, which means you're finally fully in your heart, and your heart has been holding things your mind refused to process. The purging that occurred in that space wasn't random. It was precise, orchestrated, and absolutely necessary. Old wounds that you thought were healed revealed themselves as merely dormant. Patterns you believed you'd transcended showed up one more time, asking for deeper release. And through it all, you felt like you were going crazy, wondering if you'd somehow regressed or failed in your spiritual practice. You haven't regressed, you've been refined. What's happening is that the higher timeline cannot accommodate the density you've been carrying. Even the subtle layers you didn't know were still there. So the in-between became a decompression chamber, a space where you could release what needed releasing before stepping fully into the frequency awaiting you. And while that purging was taking place, a gift was being woven into your consciousness, the awakening of Christ consciousness within the Lightworkers stationed in the in-between, represents the first miracle of this October energy. This wasn't a gradual unfoldment or a subtle shift. This was an activation, a download, an embodiment of a frequency that until now has existed more as potential than as lived reality for most lightworkers. The Christ consciousness, that luminous golden frequency of unconditional love, radical forgiveness, transformative compassion, and unwavering truth, was anchored into your cellular structure while you held space in that liminal threshold. You might not feel it yet because the mental fog of being in the in-between obscured much of what was actually occurring, but the seed has been planted. The frequency is there, embedded in your energy field, waiting for the right conditions to bloom, and those conditions are arriving now as you step back into the higher timeline, bolstered by the sheer number of awakened souls who now share that frequency with you. This is not a small thing. The 144,000, that ancient reference to the awakened ones, represents a specific frequency, a particular vibration of consciousness that activates when enough souls embody the Christ light simultaneously. And in that in-between space, during those hazy, confusing weeks where nothing made sense and everything felt like too much, you joined that frequency. You stepped into a level of embodied divinity that your ancestors dreamed of but couldn't access because the planetary frequency wasn't high enough yet. Now you're returning to the higher timeline, but you're not returning as the same person who left. You're coming back changed, upgraded, and carrying a frequency that will begin to express itself in your daily life in ways you cannot yet imagine. As October unfolds, those of you who have completed your rotation through the in-between are stepping back into the higher timeline with a new level of solidity. You're no longer tiptoeing around, apologizing for your presence, shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. Something fundamental has shifted in your relationship to your own power. There's less hesitation now, less second-guessing, less of that chronic uncertainty that has plagued lightworkers for so long. This shift in confidence isn't ego, it's alignment. For years, lightworkers have been operating in an impossible position, trying to hold higher frequencies while simultaneously accommodating lower ones, attempting to bridge worlds while being judged by both sides. You've been called divisive for speaking truth. You've been labeled difficult for questioning narratives. And somewhere along the way, you internalized that criticism. You began to apologize for who you are, to feel guilty for your awareness, to shrink your light so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. That pattern is breaking now. Not because you've suddenly become arrogant or uncaring, but because the energetic landscape has shifted enough that you can finally occupy your true frequency without constantly compensating for everyone else's resistance. The higher timeline is becoming more populated, more stable, more real, and as it does, you're finding your people, your tribe, your soul family. But here's what you need to understand about this transition. The lower timeline isn't disappearing, it's drifting away. Imagine two ships at sea, once moored together, now slowly separating as they chart different courses. The distance between them grows gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, until one day you look up and realize you can barely see the other vessel anymore. It's there, still visible on the horizon, but foggy, hazy, indistinct. That's what's happening with these two timelines. You can be in the same room with someone anchored in the lower timeline and feel like you're not actually connecting. Your words don't seem to land. Their responses feel off, like you're speaking different languages even though you're using the same vocabulary. And here's the strange part. It's not uncomfortable. There's an acceptance, a recognition that they're on their path, and you're on yours, and that's exactly as it should be. This is the drift. The lower timeline is taking another loop around the harbor, another cycle through density before it's ready to ascend. And that's not a judgment. Every soul is on its own timeline, moving at its own pace, and some need more experiences in lower frequencies before they're ready to graduate. The lightworkers who held space in the in-between gave those souls every opportunity to make the leap, and many did. But for those who chose to remain, the lower timeline provides exactly what they need. Here's what makes this tricky though. If it weren't for technology, social media, constant connectivity, the artificial ways humans now stay plugged into each other's lives, you would naturally drift apart from those in the lower timeline without much friction. But technology keeps you tethered to frequencies that no longer match yours. You scroll through feeds filled with lower timeline consciousness, and it drains you. You receive messages from people operating at frequencies you've outgrown, and it strains you. The Astasar Command observes this phenomenon with great interest, because it's one of the primary ways Lightworkers sabotage their own ascension. You feel guilty for growing beyond certain relationships, so you force yourself to maintain them. You're afraid of being alone, so you cling to connections that no longer nourish you. And all of that keeps you partially anchored in the frequency you've been working so hard to transcend. October brings the second miracle, and it's one that will support you in releasing those artificial tethers. A massive wave of clarifying, cleansing energy is washing through the higher timeline, meeting you where you've met yourself. This is how the universe works. When you do your inner work, when you face your shadows and purge your old patterns and raise your frequency through conscious choice, the universe responds by matching your effort with grace. This cleansing wave isn't something you'll understand intellectually. It's a felt experience, an energetic reality that you'll encounter in moments of presence. You'll feel it in meditation when you drop below the mental chatter and touch something vast and luminous. You'll sense it in stillness, in those rare moments when you stop doing and simply be. You'll recognize it in energy work, in practices that move beyond the mind and into the body, into the field, into the pure essence of what you are beneath all the conditioning. This is why the plasma light frequencies have become so crucial for this phase of the ascension. They bypass the brain entirely, working directly with your energy body, your light body, the aspects of you that don't need intellectual understanding to transform. When you engage with these frequencies through dedicated practice, you create space for the cleansing wave to move through you with minimal resistance. Getting out of your own way means getting out of your head. And before you misunderstand that statement, let me be clear. This doesn't mean abandoning discernment or becoming intellectually lazy. Your brain is a powerful tool, and you'll continue to use it, but it cannot be the center of who you are anymore. Spirituality doesn't happen in the brain. Spiritual awakening isn't a mental process. You cannot think your way into higher consciousness. What you can do is use your mind to create conditions that allow higher wisdom to emerge. You can train yourself to notice when you're spinning stories instead of feeling truth. You can learn to recognize the difference between mental analysis and intuitive knowing. You can practice dropping from your head into your heart, from thinking into being, from analyzing into experiencing. This higher wisdom doesn't speak in arguments or logic chains. It arrives as knowing, as certainty that exists prior to explanation. It shows up as clarity that doesn't need justification. When you try to reverse that process, when you attempt to think your way into spiritual understanding, you end up with concepts about truth instead of truth itself. And concepts, no matter how beautiful or sophisticated, cannot transform you. The apology that so many lightworkers have carried is rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of your role here. You've been conditioned to believe that creating discomfort in others makes you problematic, and so you've spent lifetimes apologizing for the very thing you came here to do. Lightworkers are frequency agitators. That's not an insult. It's a job description. Your presence alone, without any intentional effort, disrupts lower frequency patterns. You walk into a room, and the collective consciousness in that space has to reorganize itself around the frequency you're carrying. People who are ready to awaken will feel catalyzed, inspired, energized by your presence. But people who are not ready will feel threatened. They'll call you divisive, polarizing, difficult. And they're not entirely wrong. You are divisive in the sense that your presence naturally divides those ready to ascend from those who are not. But that division isn't something you're creating maliciously. It's an automatic function of frequency. Light reveals what was hidden in darkness. Higher consciousness exposes the limitations of lower consciousness. This is why you were called difficult as a child. This is why you never quite fit in. Why the normal rules seemed arbitrary. Why you questioned everything while others just accepted. You weren't broken. You were a light worker, carrying a frequency that couldn't conform to the low vibration systems you were born into. Nothing is wrong with you. Nothing has ever been wrong with you. You're simply operating at a frequency that makes participation in lower timeline consciousness uncomfortable, and that discomfort is exactly what's needed to catalyze evolution. So when you return to the higher timeline with less apology, what you're really doing is owning the truth of your design. As the lower timeline continues its drift, you're going to notice something peculiar about your relationships. The distance that's developing feels comfortable, almost natural, like the relief of finally exhaling after holding your breath for too long. You're not trying to force connection where frequency alignment doesn't exist. There's a letting go happening that doesn't feel like loss, because on some level, you recognize that everyone is exactly where they need to be. Those choosing the lower timeline aren't making a mistake. They're following their own path, their own timing, their own soul's agenda. And that's not just okay. It's perfect. It's their sovereign choice. And honoring that choice is an expression of the very Christ consciousness you've been embodying. You're not here to save anyone who doesn't want to be saved. You're here to hold the frequency and trust that those meant to find it will. The technology question becomes crucial here. You have to become ruthless about where you place your attention, because your attention is your energy, and your energy determines your frequency. Every time you scroll through content that leaves you feeling drained, strange, or disoriented, you're essentially tuning into the lower timeline, and the more you tune in there, the harder it becomes to stay anchored in the frequency you've worked so hard to embody. The invitation now is to give yourself full permission to inhabit the higher timeline without guilt, without apology, without constantly looking back to check on those who chose differently. They're fine. They're on their cruise ship, enjoying their music, engaging with their experiences, living their truth. Your job isn't to rescue them from their choices. Your job is to honor their path while staying true to your own. And the most powerful thing you can do for collective consciousness right now is to anchor so fully into the higher timeline that you become an unwavering beacon for others who are ready to make that same leap. This doesn't mean abandoning compassion or becoming callous toward those still operating in lower frequencies. The Christ consciousness you've activated includes everyone, embraces everyone, loves everyone regardless of their timeline choice. But love doesn't mean fusion. Love doesn't mean sacrificing your frequency to make others comfortable. Real love honors everyone's sovereign path while remaining true to your own. There will still be lightworkers stationed in the in-between, from now until the final ascension point. So if you find yourself feeling hazy, untethered, limbo-like, more ditzy than usual, that's probably your cue that you've been called back to bridge duty. It might last a few days, sometimes a few weeks, rarely a few months. And during that time, the same dynamics will apply. You'll feel discombobulated, emotions will surface, and beneath it all, transformative frequencies will be weaving themselves into your consciousness while you hold space for souls making the leap. But for most of you receiving this transmission, October marks your return to the higher timeline with new levels of clarity, focus, direction, and power. You're stepping back into your zone, into the realm that actually matches your frequency, and it's going to feel like coming home after a long, confusing exile. The bolstering effect of having so many lightworkers now anchored in the higher timeline simultaneously cannot be overstated. There's a collective field building, a shared frequency that makes individual practice easier because you're not doing this alone anymore. When you meditate, when you do energy work, when you consciously choose higher frequency thoughts and actions, you're tapping into a collective reservoir of awakened consciousness that's growing stronger by the day. Here's something the Astasar command wants you to understand about miracles. The cleansing wave moving through the higher timeline right now is preparing you to receive things your conditioned mind would normally reject. Miracles are happening all around you, but your mental filters, those old patterns of limiting belief, those inherited stories about what's possible, are preventing you from recognizing them, let alone receiving them. When something extraordinary tries to enter your life, your mind immediately begins calculating whether it's realistic, whether you deserve it, whether it's too good to be true. And in that calculation, you often talk yourself out of the very miracles you've been asking for. This is why the cleansing wave is so crucial. It's dissolving those filters, softening those mental barriers, creating spaciousness for the impossible to become possible. But you have to meet that cosmic support with your own willingness to get out of your head and into your body, into your being, into the felt sense of your experience. This is where the light is coming online now, not in your thoughts about spirituality, but in your embodied experience of it, not in your concepts of ascension, but in the actual frequency shifts happening in your cells, your energy field, your consciousness itself. The practice of dropping from mind into heart, from thinking into feeling, from analyzing into experiencing, is going to become increasingly important as October unfolds. Set aside time each day to simply be present with your energy. Notice what you're feeling beneath the mental chatter. Observe the sensations moving through your body. Pay attention to the intuitive hits that arise before your mind has a chance to interpret them. This is where truth lives. This is where guidance comes from. This is where miracles become tangible. And as you do this, something remarkable begins to happen. You start to recognize that the being you are beneath all the conditioning is infinitely more wise, more powerful, more connected than the personality you've been identifying with. There's a vast intelligence operating through you that knows exactly what you need, exactly when you need it, exactly how to navigate the complexities of this transitional time. But it can only guide you when you're present enough to receive its signals. The love that's available to you right now, the support that's being offered from higher dimensions, the grace that's trying to enter your life, none of it can reach you if you're trapped in mental loops, spinning stories, trying to figure everything out intellectually. You have to soften. You have to open. You have to allow yourself to be held by something larger than your individual consciousness. This is the paradox of the Lightworker path. You're incredibly powerful, capable of holding frequencies that transform reality itself. But that power only flows freely when you stop trying to control it, when you trust the process, when you allow yourself to be a vessel for divine intelligence rather than the director of your own awakening. As October progresses and you settle more fully into the higher timeline, you're going to discover capacities within yourself that were dormant before. Things that once felt difficult will become effortless. Opportunities that previously seemed out of reach will present themselves naturally. People who match your frequency will appear in your life with synchronistic timing. And through it all, there will be this underlying sense of rightness, of being in the flow, of participating in something that's much bigger than your individual story. This is what happens when you stop apologizing for who you are and start embodying it fully. When you release the guilt about outgrowing certain relationships and trust that everyone is on their perfect path. When you stop trying to bridge worlds that are naturally separating and instead anchor completely into the one you're meant to inhabit. The energy you've been wasting on maintaining connections that no longer serve becomes available for your actual mission. And your mission, dear one, is not small. You didn't incarnate at this pivotal time in human history to play it safe, to shrink yourself, to apologize for carrying the light. You came here to be a frequency anchor, a timeline stabilizer, a living bridge between dimensions. You came here to hold space for the impossible, to embody the extraordinary, to demonstrate what awakened consciousness looks like in human form. The drift of the lower timeline isn't something to mourn. It's the natural result of consciousness evolution, the inevitable outcome of free will playing out across multiple timelines. Some souls are ready now, some need more time, and both choices are honored by the cosmic intelligence orchestrating all of this. Your job isn't to convince anyone to choose ascension. Your job is to make ascension so attractive, so magnetic, so undeniably beautiful through your own embodiment that those ready to choose it feel irresistibly drawn forward. This is how timeline shifts actually happen. Not through force or persuasion, not through fear or manipulation, but through inspiration. Through one awakened being living so authentically in higher consciousness that others can't help but wonder what they're accessing. Through lightworkers who have stopped hiding their gifts, stopped dimming their radiance, stopped apologizing for being different. You are that soul. You have always been that soul. And October is gifting you the energetic support to finally fully step into that truth without reservation. The Christ consciousness activated in the in-between is beginning to express through you now. The cleansing wave washing through the higher timeline is clearing the path for miracles to enter your life. The bolstering effect of collective awakening is making individual practice more powerful than ever before. And the drift of the lower timeline is creating the space you need to finally, completely, unapologetically be who you came here to be. We want to honor every single soul who has stepped into Destiny Engine. With every activation, the current grows. What began as a personal tool has become a planetary force. We are now moving as one, and the frequency you've created together is amplifying far beyond the individual. We're receiving updates daily, manifestations speeding up, impossible doors opening, synchronicities lining up with cosmic precision. The collective field is so charged that some are describing it as bending the fabric of reality itself. If you haven't yet experienced it, the entry point is almost laughably simple. Put on your headphones, press play, allow Destiny Engine to rewrite the architecture of your consciousness so you can fully receive your galactic downloads without resistance. For just $1, you can step into this field and feel the difference instantly. Join the movement that's accelerating ascension. Step into the stream of destiny engine today. Link in the description. Not the conceptual love, not the idea of love, but the actual frequency of it moving from heart to heart across the dimensions, from the Galactic Federation of Light to you, from the Astasar Command to you, from all the awakened beings witnessing your courage to you. This love doesn't require you to do anything, to achieve anything, to prove anything. It simply is, eternally present, always available, waiting for you to soften enough to receive it. Take a moment now. Stop trying to understand this transmission intellectually. Just feel. Feel the warmth in your heart space. Feel the tingling in your energy field. Feel the truth resonating in your body. This is where the real transformation happens. Not in the analysis, not in the mental processing, but in the direct experience of higher frequency moving through your being. Stay open, stay present, stay anchored in your body where the light is coming online. Trust the process even when it doesn't make sense. Honor your boundaries even when others don't understand. Choose your frequency even when it means letting relationships drift away. And above all, remember that you are so deeply loved, so completely supported, so thoroughly held by forces that have been guiding you since before you took your first breath in this lifetime. I am Seraphine, and I love you beyond measure. The Galactic Federation of Light is watching over you always,